All right, good afternoon, everyone. Bon après-midi, tout le monde. Merci pour venir m'écouter. Thanks for coming to listen to me. So when Ruth first asked me to come talk to all of you today, I was very clear. I was like, Ruth, I am not a cybersecurity expert. I barely know how to spell it. But at the same time, she said, well, no. Well, like, why not talk about exactly that? Because at the end of the day, it's schmucks like me that are sitting in the boardroom listening to all of you brilliant cybersecurity professionals, with you trying to communicate the value proposition and importance of incorporating cybersecurity into the businesses that we lead. So I thought I'd take a few minutes today just to chat with you about, as a cybersecurity expert, certainly coming up in the field, that if you do have the misfortune of having to brief to somebody like myself about cybersecurity, that you can do so in a way that will permeate and register. So today's talk, first and foremost, I'm just going to start with kind of going into a deep dive into explaining the brain of a business executives. And for those of you who've worked with business executives, this is going to be the shortest part of the presentation, for obvious reasons. The next step, we'll just get into talking a little bit about where some of those blockers exist, and then look at maybe some strategies that you can take when presenting to C-suite executives on the importance of cybersecurity, and sort of the key takeaways in that space. So hopefully everybody's not going to be too food drunk and falling asleep in their plates, and we'll be able to get through this together. So if there's one thing you take away from today, and I apologize, my PowerPoint presentation is not nearly as slick as the TD people that were up here before. It was absolutely fantastic. So I do not have those mad Jedi PowerPoint skills. If there's one thing you can take away from today, is this is essentially a synthesis of the brain of a C-suite executive. So really focused on revenue, reputation, and resilience when it comes to the business. These are the things that are constantly floating in the heads of business executives when looking at any new idea, new concept, way forward, or even in the context of risk mitigation measures. So again, if there's one thing you take away from today, it's really looking at understanding that business executives, this is what's going in their head, through their head. And from cybersecurity messaging that we're going to talk a little bit about today, it's really hitting that sweet spot right in the middle, where if you can have messaging that hits all of those 3 points, you will effectively be able to sell your cybersecurity solution to even the most Luddite executive like myself. So let's talk a little bit about that a little bit further. So when looking at this graphic, the other piece to think about is how many senior executives see cybersecurity. And it's seen as a cost. It's seen as an overhead cost, both in the short term and in the long term. In the short term, because there's an upfront cost, you're coming to that executive and you're saying, well, I'm going to need you to invest X into the firm, either through new resources, new systems, new platforms, and there's a dollar value there. Then there's the downstream costs of operating and maintaining whatever thing it is that you are presenting and want to build to protect the company. So that's already registering as non-billable, non-utilizable overhead costs that are being incurred by the company. And of course, what you're selling is protection. So if you do your job right and you get buy-in and you build this marvelous system, the result is nothing happens. So how do you prove the value of something that if it's working right, nothing happens, right? So that's kind of a dual challenge that you face at the front end of getting into the brain of an executive to help them to get them to understand that importance. And a lot of that has to do with the communications barriers, because cyber professionals and business professionals use two different languages in how they operate and how they speak. Now, these are maybe not the best examples, but there are a few that give you a little bit of an idea of how to translate language from cybersecurity professionals and industry or business professionals in communicating what you're trying to say. Because fundamentally, you have to overcome that misalignment in messaging. Because if not, guys like me, eyes are going to roll back in the head. I'm going to be looking at my phone, my watch, and just being like, when is this guy going to be done? And it's tragic. Okay. It is tragic, but that is the pragmatic reality, right? And you've got to get these individuals aboard. So doing that means talking their language. And you'll see something interesting in the wording here, where again, it goes back to that first slide where your everything is linking back to that concept of resilience, of revenue, and of reputation, right? As to how that is going to impact the business, those three key facets of the business. So that's sort of the crux of the communications barrier, right? So how to overcome that? Well, we talked a little bit about that, just about using different words in your approach to communication, but also being able to convey the reality and the tangibility of what it is that you're talking about. Chris Lynham was up here and he gave some really, really good examples of case studies of sort of like, here's some horrible stuff that happened, and here's how much this cost the company, the industry, the individual. And it does create a tangibility that provides these case study examples to demonstrate this is the real cost of this. And that's super important, because you're creating the case studies, especially for people that went to business school. Business school students learn through business cases and case studies. So to be able to bring that language back and be able to demonstrate through case studies, as well as using the language of not so much, well, this new cyber system is going to cost us $500,000, as opposed to saying this $500,000 investment is going to reduce your risk of manufacturing shutdown by 60%, and it's going to mitigate cost risk for your downstream operations by $2.4 million. Right? So it's the same thing, but just communicated in a different way that aligns with the priorities of the business. So, this, is there a lag? No, I pushed the wrong button. There we go. So, and this is a very facile example of what something like that could look like. Like Chris's examples were far better. If I'd known, I would have plagiarized some of his slides, but failing that, you have this. But again, mapping out how an attack can affect operations, how it affects customer service. God help you if the stock value drops. Reputational fallout, right? Are your clients going to trust you if you have cybersecurity breaches? I mean, there's a plethora of examples of that happen with online companies that had breaches of information, and that went very, very public. And in some cases, these companies ended up folding because they just simply had lost the trust of their clients, and their clients went elsewhere, right? So these are the case studies and examples that you can use when talking to executives who, by the way, have very short-term memory. So bringing back examples from the past can be very, very effective at communicating those communicating those pieces and getting that through to the executives. So again, going back to revenue, reputation, and resilience, and how that ties into those key elements. So then it gets to, we've gone through all of this. We've talked about these three elements. We've talked about the communications challenges. We've talked about the brain of a C-suite executive. So how do you functionally build that case? We've touched on a few little bits of it here, but this is my attempt at summarizing what your pitch would look like is synthesized, excuse me, here. So first and foremost, go to your business strategy. Every company should have a strategy, and that strategy is going to go and line up exactly with where the company wants to go, with how they want to grow revenue, how they want to build their brand, and how they want to increase their resilience in order to have greater predictability for whatever it is, the service or the thing that they're manufacturing. So take a deep dive into the strategy as the cybersecurity expert. Take a look at what it is that is mapped out there, and start finding those. In French, they use the term the ficelle, the connective tissue between those strategic goals that the company has, and specifically what it is that you are trying to do as a cybersecurity expert to be able to enable those goals. And that leads into the second point of framing cybersecurity as an enabler, not a blocker. It is not a cost. It is not an IT thing, right? Where it's like, oh God, what is this IT thing going to cost? We just had to buy a new version of Windows last week. Now it's this. It's not the same thing. And by allowing executives to think it's the same thing, you're doing yourself a disservice. It needs to be framed as a business enabler, because the more robust and the more secure your company is from a cybersecurity perspective, well, the more trustworthy your company is going to be. And more today, certainly in the service industry, so much of what we do and our ability to survive and thrive as a company is built on trust. It doesn't take much to look in the papers in the last 2 years with the federal government, when we look at the ArriveCAN scandal, when we look at the McKinsey report, and I'm not targeting any specific company here, but these are examples that exist in the news, and how that undermined the trust associated with, in this case, in the case I just brought up, management consulting firms writ large, but also to a degree as Canadian citizens, potentially even trust in the bureaucracy within the federal government. So translate that to a cyber attack and the reputational impacts that can have. It's no different. So again, I alluded to this before. Make sure that your messaging, whatever it is that you build out as in your pitch, is simple, clear, and tied to outcomes. And that goes back to the strategy. Understand what your VPs want as outcomes, as critical success factors for the company, and then tie that to what it is that you're asking. Again, it's not, we need 500K to upgrade our endpoint detection. No, it's we need 500K, or 500K will reduce breach likelihood by 60% and avoid $2 million in exposure. That sounds a lot more enticing, because it doesn't sound as much like a cost. It sounds like an investment in creating a more robust structure for the company. The other piece is engage executives in simulation or tabletop exercises. And that harkens back to Chris Lynam's amazing slides, where he was able to break down these examples and be able to map them out. If you can do that in a way that actually engages your executive class and gives them the tangibility of understanding how bad things can get, how fast, and the long-term impacts. You know, in natural disasters, there's when you do natural disaster recovery, they say that for every hour of a natural disaster occurring, I think it's 24 hours to fix what happened in that hour, right? I don't know what the stats are for cybersecurity, but there's probably a similar ratio of the duration of an attack, the impact of the attack, and the amount of time after that it's discovered to actually fix all the things that are broken. You know, that's incredibly important to communicate as well. And the last thing is find allies. As a cybersecurity professional, you're not alone. You have other people in the company that have aligned priorities to you. Your CFO. Your CFO is not in the business of losing money, is not in the business of taking on financial liability. That individual can be a huge ally to you. The same goes for whoever your legal advisor is, because a lot of cybersecurity is tied to governance, which means is this policy or is this solution that you're putting in place, is it actually tied to policy? Is it a corporate obligation that if you fail to enact could put you at risk of incurring some sort of fines or some sort of governance liability downstream? Super important. And last, if you're privileged enough to have a risk professional within your firm, leverage that person, because they will be able to really manifest the tangible risks and downstream impacts of a cybersecurity attack. Certainly, if those impacts have costs from a manufacturing perspective, shutting down an automotive line for 3 days because of a cyber attack, having to deal with all kinds of issues regarding your banking, your payroll, all these other elements that can be impacted by that. So look for those allies. You may be the champion, but these allies can help you in the boardroom to convey why it is important to be able to do so, to have robust cybersecurity practices in place. So closing out, I think that was my last slide. You get to look at our logo. Just the key takeaways here. Again, going back to that initial slide of revenue, reputation, and resilience. Those are the foundational elements that any company is going to be looking at when framing any idea or any cost that's brought to them. In your case, as a cybersecurity professional, you have every tool at your disposal to get to yes. And that a lot of that comes from just simply changing the dynamic of the conversation and speaking to these executives in the language that does resonate with them. So, and the key, and again, the one sentence that I always tell my executives when we talk about cyber is that a breach just doesn't hit IT, it hits the business. So, on that note, thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions as long as they're not about cybersecurity. All right, dead silence. Awesome. Thank you very much.